Okay, so we are recording, and this is me, Shanna Kurtz, hopping on to share my cancer story. So I get this a lot. I'm in the natural health world, and so I have a lot of people that either have a loved one
Oh, I'm
that
I'm good.
they're wanting to. I'm gonna mute everybody. I'm actually gonna mute all of you, but I'm gonna ask you to use the chat. Okay. So I get questions a lot of times about like what was your story, Shanna? A little bit of statistics. I was diagnosed when I was 20 years old, actually 2021. I was in the hospital when we got my diagnosis. I battled naturally for 10 years, had a surgery, and I'll go into more detail of this. But my statistics, my first diagnosis, they gave me 6 months to live from MD Anderson. That was 23 years ago. And then I battled naturally for 10 years and then had a bigger surgery. And all of these are the parts that we're going to get into tonight, guys. And then I had the bigger surgery. And again, they told me 5 to 6 years would be the outcome. And that was 13 years. So clearly, there's some things at play. And I am not going to say I have it all figured out. I'm going to say, I'm trying to mute. I'm going to throw a couple people. Who? Raise your hand if you're somewhere that I can throw you as a co-host. Cindy, so you can help me with muting people. If people come in, I can't mute them fast enough. Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Okay, so like if I had to give the short version, like this is like it's like I want to give a ton of disclosures, right? Because I can't say I have it all figured out, but I'm going to share my story, the parts that added up, the things like that. Maybe there's something in my story that helps you or helps somebody that you love or somebody that you're going to come across later. But here's what I really, really, really want from all of you. I have a loose outline. Chronologically, I can tell you how this happened, and I kind of will follow that because I want to know. But let me rephrase this. What I want to know is what you want to know. Like, I want this to be exactly what you want it to be, right? So as I'm telling my story, if there's things that you want to know, like, hey, did you feel like you were disconnected to God at that time? Ask it. If you are saying, hey, how old were you at that time? Was this before the surgery? Like any stuff like that, I really want this to be interactive. And so there's just, I don't want it to be me just telling a story without serving y'all and what's of interest. So if you already know there's things that you 100% are hoping that I'm covering, or a question like that, please drop it in the chat, or along the way drop it in the chat, and we'll go from there. I'd love to know if there's anything right off the bat that you're wanting to get out of this. So with that said, we'll go ahead and get started. So my story kind of really starts back when I was a kid. So you need to know that my mom was already what we call crunchy. She already was into natural health. That's just how she raised us. Like, we were the kids that ate pretty natural. I mean, really, I chalk it up to we were poor. Like, my dad's a disabled Vietnam veteran. This is back when I think they probably made a couple $100s a month, even though he'd lost his left hand. Veterans benefits in the 80s weren't anything to brag about. And then my mom was a school teacher. So, we didn't have things like sodas. I didn't grow up eating junk food. We ate really healthy stuff. When we were sick, we didn't really go to doctors. My mom was like, I joke that it was echinacea tea and peppermint tea and homeopathics and lots of nasty drops that she put in your mouth. But I wouldn't have said I was a sickly kid, right? So fast forward, and I was in high school, and high school years were crazy years for me. My parents divorced when I was 8. When I was in high school, my mom had remarried when I was a child and then divorced again when I was in high school. And that was a season that she moved to Arizona. I was living in Texas. So when I first started showing symptoms, so a lot of times this is the question, what was your first symptoms of cancer? I was in high school, and up until that point, I had been, really a great student, straight A student, overachiever. I was in sports, all the things. And about the time that I started showing symptoms, I was probably 15 or 16, I started just having major fatigue. And, my teachers and coaches would look back and tell you that they thought I was just being lazy. I was being a rebellious teenager, which they weren't entirely wrong. There was definitely some truth to that. But like I was skipping school to go home and take naps. I wasn't doing anything. Well, sometimes I was doing fun stuff, but a lot of times I was skipping school to go home and take naps. That was like my first sign. I also started having bladder infections, couldn't figure out what that was. Some weird putting on weight, losing weight. But overall, I just remember feeling so frustrated. Like I'd be on the track and I'd run and give it my best. And my coach would be like, "What's wrong with you?" And I would just bawl because I'm like, I don't know. So I graduated high school. And I lived on my own my last couple of years. That's a whole nother story. My mom had moved away, but I didn't want to leave my friends. So I lived on my own my last couple of years. So that was different too, which I think, I'll accredit some mindset stuff too. And I'll kind of tie all this together. You'll see why that matters for me to tell you during that season, because I wasn't close to my mom in those last couple of years. I really resented my mom for yanking the rug out from under me in my last couple of years of high school. She moved away and I had to work and all the things. And then here I'm not feeling well. And then, and then 2 weeks before graduation, I lost my best friend to cancer. It was all unexpected. It was crazy. It's been 25 years. It's crazy nonsense. But my mom ended up driving down to Texas and loading me up in her car and moving me to Arizona. And so I'm in Arizona, and that was the summer that I started showing some bigger symptoms. Like I started having unexplained abdominal pain. I went to some doctors, like I'd go back and forth from Texas to Arizona. At this point, they were telling me that I just had acid reflux. I remember asking for my doctor in Texas to give me an MRI or a CAT. Like I didn't even know what I was asking for, but like something, more something. And he was like, no, you're too young. You don't have anything wrong. Just here's some Prevacid. And so I think I took Prevacid for a couple of years. The abdominal pain, so I'm like, y'all, I'm 18, 19, 20. At 20, I'd gotten used to the abdominal pain. I'd had an episode of pleurisy. If y'all know what pleurisy is, where, they give you it's where, I don't know, and I'm not going to go into but your lung, it hurts to breathe. It hurts to take a deep breath. And I'd had a doctor give me a pleurisy belt. So it basically, it tightens your ribs. So you take a deep breath without it being painful. So I'm off at college and I'd already had pleurisy. And so I go to the campus. I'm in Flagstaff. I go to the campus nurse. And remember, I'm already decided there's not anything major with me. So I'm 20 years old. I'm in my third year of university. And I go to the doctor and I'm like, hey, she's a nurse practitioner. Her name's Elizabeth Brown. I will love her for always. And I was like, hey, I just need a rib belt. If you'll just prescribe me one of those, that's all I need. And she's like, let's do an x-ray. And she did the x-ray and she calls me back into her office. And I remember when you're going through major health stuff, how healthcare acts in the room tells you exactly what they're about to say. Okay. So she's got this real stressed something. And she's like, I'm going to do some more tests. So in the next week, what I found out was in my x-ray, one of my lungs was sitting about 2 inches higher than the other. And that doesn't make any sense. Okay. So I went to a gastro specialist, she sent me to a gynecologist, all kinds of different tests. So she was trying to rule out everything, so all of that, we finally find out there's a tumor. Okay. So, I'm knowing something's wrong just because she's taking this so seriously. Nobody's ever taken me so seriously before. And I told her about the abdominal pain, but it wasn't until I was nobody had ever given me pain meds or anything for it. I was sitting in her office. And one of the pain it would come like an attack. And so I'm sitting in her office and it hit me and I legit fell out of the chair, just breathing through it. And from that point forward, I really had her attention, and my mom always said I just had a really high pain tolerance. I mean, if you know me, I'm kind of stubborn. I'm I just want to get stuff done. Let me just get past this. And so, but that pain episode is what, made her really kind of stick with me. So fast forward, they find a tumor. We do another test. It looks like the tumor's grown in a week. I'm withdrawing from university. Is this the stuff y'all want to hear? Okay. So I'm withdrawing from university, and like life's upending on me. I mean, you can imagine I'm 20 years old, and withdraw. I'm moving out of I had an apartment I had to move out of, all the things. I'm in Phoenix. The doctor there, this all happens really fast. Luckily, I had an aunt that was, or great aunt that was seeing a oncologist who was willing to take my case. Because at this time, they thought I needed a gynecologic oncologist. So that's who I went to. And it was really cool because I got to go to doctor's appointments with my great aunt and, eat soybeans in the waiting room. And so it didn't feel quite so crazy as it all was, right? And Dr. Freel was he probably was in his early 70s by the time I saw him, and he was so cute. Every time he talked to me, his chin would quiver. He just was this like adorable, sweet older man who was just really, really good at what he did, and he loved women, and he just so passionate about what he did. So he was my surgeon, and it went crazy. Like when they went in, they expected a fibrosis tumor, something like picture like a grapefruit size is what they were expecting, something solid. Well, he went in and it was like Jello. Okay. So there's not a cutting it out. So as they're trying to, like, I'm reading the medical report later, it was a scooping of hands. Like this is a weird cancer. Okay. Well, because of the way that it had blood vessels to different parts of my body, I started bleeding out. So, at some point he even came out of the room covered in blood to tell my mom he didn't know if I was going to make it. So they weren't able to get all the cancer, but they've got to close me up. My blood pressure's dropping. They've got to stop. So they close me up. And, obviously from what I remember, I'm giving you my mom's version of the story, what I remember, those kind of things. So I remember like recovery was okay after that. We thought we were in the clear. Then I had internal bleeding. So then we get okay, she's got internal bleeding. And I remember hearing some cool story of, how like I guess doctors get together in rooms together and talk about their cases. And so somebody was like, hey, we can try this thing. And so some other doctor went in and shot little springs into like coils or something into where I was bleeding internally. And ta-da, he saved my life. And I turned 21 and, Dr. Freel came in on my 21st birthday, and he comes into the room and he sits down and he says, okay, well, we sent your slides off and we got them back. He sent them to Harvard, and he's like, what you have is called peritoneal mesothelioma. And what I want you to know when you start to research this, because this is not my type of cancer, I can't help you from here. You're going to have to go find a different doctor. And when you start researching this cancer, and y'all, if there's anything you remember, it's this conversation with Dr. Freel, because I think he saved my life with this conversation. He said, as you start researching this, Shanna, you're going to find some really scary negative stuff. You're going to find statistics that are really scary. But here's what I want you to know. When you see statistics that say something like 95% of the people die, I want you to remember that for the 5%, they do not have a 5% survival. They have 100%. And you have to always, always consider yourself in the 5%. And, chin quivering, I will tell you later when I told my aunt, I was like, isn't he so cute how his chin always quivers? And she said, Shanna, his chin has never quivered in the office with me. So, side note, y'all, 10 years later, this is going to be fun. Lots of crying, right? Y'all, like 10 years later in a season when I was doing really, really well, I think it was maybe 8 years after the surgery, and I was doing so healthy, I ran into him at a restaurant in Phoenix and was able to walk up to him and his family and remind him of my case and just tell him, how well that I'd lived, right? Okay. So we go home from that hospital, from that surgery. I go home with mom, and emotionally, this is a hard, I'm 20 years old and I'm finding out, I couldn't even do my own research in the beginning. I remember sleeping and my mom is what would you do as a mom? You start calling every specialist, surgeon, everything you can find. And so she's doing that because I'm recovering from a major abdominal surgery. And she would have these conversations and I would hear them. She had a really small house in the mountains, and so I could hear every conversation. And she would tell this story about me almost dying and how, it was this, and it's this rare form of cancer caused from asbestos exposure and all of these things. And she would tell the story, and I remember finally telling her, I need you to not say this story in front of me again. Like, I don't want to hear it. This doesn't feel like you're talking about me, and I don't want to hear the story anymore. Now, I will say something transitioned where I became proactive. So obviously, in the beginning, I was not. I was processing emotionally. It's a lot, and it probably took me getting well enough for my mom to go back to work to where I had to get in front of the computer and do the research. So, okay, same time, we were looking for surgeons. We go to MD Anderson. MD Anderson's the first, obviously my family is in Texas. And y'all, this is the time, let me say, most people know I battled my cancer almost, mostly naturally. There's surgeries in here, obviously, but for the most part, it was naturally. It's not easy financially to do naturally. I think this is why a lot of people just rule it out, y'all. And let me say, we couldn't afford it. There was when we went to MD Anderson, we couldn't afford the gas to go to that trip. My mom's kids, her students, she was a teacher, they kept bringing change every day from home to it was pennies and dimes and nickels raising money for us to go to MD Anderson. It was the whole community, both in Cuero and in Arizona, was absolutely a huge part of my story. Okay, so MD Anderson, I go in, and the doctor there, she was German and very, if y'all know, I talk about personality types. She was very green, y'all, very to the point, no fluff. Here's what we're doing. And she told me about a chemotherapy drug that she was going to prescribe. I asked her, how have you used it with somebody else? What was their results? And the short story was, yeah, she'd used it with one guy. He did well for a couple of years, and then he ended up getting a different type of cancer. So what I knew about my cancer was that it was slow growing. So mesotheliomas, specifically peritoneal, which means the abdominal cavity. Most mesotheliomas from asbestos exposure happen to the lungs. Mine had to have been a fiber that I swallowed, and then it's shaped like a corkscrew and ended up wedging itself somewhere in my abdominal cavity. So slower growing cancer. So in my mind, this is what I was thinking. I can handle a slow growing cancer. I don't necessarily want to do something that, because I get to talk about what I really believe. I believe that person's second cancer came from his chemo. I know that chemos are chemicals. I know that my asbestos is from a chemical that's not supposed to be in my body, or a fiber that's not supposed to be in my body. So in my mind, I was going to stick to the cancer I already had that was slow growing, and I wasn't going to put any more toxins in my body. I know that's not everybody's choice, but here's where I land on, should I do the chemo? Should I not do the chemo? What do you believe? If I believe that I was going to be poisoning my body, there's a lot of power in the mind. And so that's what I believed was happening. I'm going to leave you at the end of this with some tangible things that are proven in radical remissions. And one of them is trusting your intuition. And so your intuition may be to do the chemo, and then please do. But this was my story. Okay. So I leave MD Anderson with that prescription. I never filled it. I didn't take the chemo. I had also found a naturopath doctor in Arizona that I'd started going to. And that was, really, he put me on a vegetarian diet, actually the blood type diet by Dr. Diadamo. I swear by that one over the years. I'm a type A, so that's pretty much vegetarian. I did really well with that. And I went to my naturopath, Dr. Burr. I could tell you a whole nother story on how magical it is that he's I should have pulled his obituary just to because he's passed since, but he was raised in Poland. His family was the last family to leave on this boat, and then the town was blown up, and then he got it was he escaped near death in his life so many times. And then I look at how he saved my life. And what if he hadn't escaped death all the times that he did? The way that our lives are all intermingled is just absolutely mind-blowing. And even for me, there's Dr. Elizabeth Brown. What if she hadn't been my doctor in college, right? what if Dr. Freel, like what if Dr. Freel, who was the wrong doctor, he wasn't even the type of cancer I dealt with. What if I hadn't had him and I hadn't had that conversation, right? So we decided to go all natural. I had a naturopath. I also added in a chiropractor and a ear, nose, and throat surgeon who turned to a therapist. So the ear, nose, and throat surgeon was somebody that I legit just went and talked to, like processing emotionally what was happening. His background, he was from Norway. He had noticed when he was dealing with ear, nose, and throat patients that emotionally there were things tied to things happening. Okay, like people who had the same emotional issues ended up with the same type of health problems. So that's why he decided to go into more of an emotional support role, even though he was completely overqualified to do that. So that was my support team for the most part. Y'all, there were times I always want to share the truth of the financial side, because I think people think that natural health is expensive, and you know what, it is, because what if insurance didn't cover any of this? If I had just said insurance doesn't cover that, so I don't do it, I'd be dead. There's no way. Because for the 10 years that I stayed alive until the next surgery, I accredit that to what we did naturally, plant-based. Okay? So in the next 10 years, there were highs and lows in this. There were times that I put on fluid. That's one of the side effects of my cancer. So I would look a little bit pregnant, even though I wasn't. I got married in that season, and then I got really, really sick. I don't advise a new marriage and throwing in a super sick at the, I'll give you an example of why I say that. So when I was going to different doctors, I went to one in San Diego. This is when I'm still, thinking maybe I'll go traditional in conjunction with natural. And I went to a Mayo clinic as well. And this was when I was newly married, and I got sick really, really fast. And I was carrying lots of fluid. I remember one night I woke up and I couldn't breathe, and my husband had to take me to the emergency room, and I'm thinking I'm dying, cause you don't know, I'm like, oh, this is the end, all the things. So we go to Mayo Clinic. At this point, I had been plugged in enough to know the power of controlling my thoughts. Okay. So when I go to Mayo Clinic and I'm in the room and he's looking at my case and he's like, okay, well, based on what you're doing, you have and he's about to tell me how long I have to live. Well, I've already learned I'm not playing that. So I interrupted him and said, no, you don't get to tell me that. You don't, I legit would not let doctors speak time frames over me after the first one, MD Anderson. I didn't allow, this is my doctor's appointment that I'm paying for. You don't get to tell me what your experience is. You don't know my God. You don't know me. Do not do that to me. And so I remember I left, and I found out later that my husband had gone back in the room and asked him what the time frame was. And I still to this day don't know what it was. I didn't want to know it, but I felt betrayed. And I don't blame him for wanting to know what was going on, but it's no surprise our marriage didn't last didn't survive that season. I remember one time having a conversation, and it was I felt like I was having to choose between my marriage or my health. And I think anybody that's gone through a major health issue and you're surrounded by family and relationships, you know what I'm talking about. It's hard. It's really hard. There were seasons that I couldn't feed myself. I couldn't drive myself. My little brother was active Army, and he took 2 or 3 weeks of his leave at the end of his 4 years to come and legit just make me food and hand it to me. So it was a season. So in that, let me tell you what was really hard about that part. I'm gonna check the chat. Am I missing anything? Okay. In that season, I want to talk about when you're dealing with somebody who has illness. I will tell you that when I looked sick, so sick that I couldn't take care of myself, it was easier than when I felt sick and looked normal. And people want to help you, and when they can see that you need help, they want to do that. But when I had a lot of my cancer battle where I just didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel like I looked normal. For a lot of it, you wouldn't have known. I mean, y'all, when I started dating my husband, he had no clue that I had cancer. I dated him for many months before he knew. You just wouldn't have known. You wouldn't have known that this girl has terminal considered stage 4 cancer. And but I want to speak to that just because I know a lot of people, the emotional part of dealing with the in between is like, if you have people in your life, acknowledge that. Like that was super hard to in all of my years of battle. So okay, I'm gonna check chat real fast. So if there's something in there, drop it in there. Any questions? Okay. Y'all are awesome. Y'all are so encouraging. Thank you. Okay, we'll keep going because y'all are nice people. Okay, so the 10 years of the natural battle, like I said, is up and down. Some of the times I had fluids, some of the times I didn't. I worked a little bit here and there when I could. So 2008 was, I'd gotten 9 years. Okay, 9 years since the first diagnosis. And in 2008, I was working full time. I felt great. Didn't see anything coming. Now let me back this up. In 2006, I had put on a lot of fluid and had gotten pretty sick again. And I had found a doctor, a surgeon, that would put in a Tinkoff catheter. A Tinkoff catheter is a tube that goes directly into your abdominal cavity. It has to be drained sterile. Okay, so you have to learn how to take care of it 100% sterile because it's an open tube to your abdominal cavity. It's really an end of life procedure to relieve the pain that has to do with the fluid that comes from different diseases. Okay, so I had mine for 2 years, which is already like a huge record. Okay, like I would be at the beach and like just I would be in a bikini bottom and a tank top. You'd have no idea there was a Tinkoff catheter in there. Like I still lived a big life, guys. And so the Tinkoff catheter in 2008, I came home for a weekend. It was, if y'all remember, in 2008 in Texas, there was a big hurricane scare, and it was like I was loading up my dogs and I rented an SUV so I could get all my dogs off my property because I drove a sports car. I was going up to North Texas to run from the hurricane, and I got so sick. The car didn't pull out of the driveway. I immediately just fell so ill. Go into the hospital. I think I was sick for 3 days. My mom flew down. So my mom is my right-hand man. Like all of these, every doctor's appointment, like we did this together. So she flew down because I probably was being stubborn and telling her I wasn't going to the emergency room. And so she flew down and I went to the emergency room and I had an abdominal infection. So the Tinkoff catheter finally had worn out and I had to have that taken out. So here's the problem. Now I didn't have a way to drain the fluid that my cancer produced. Okay. So quickly from there, things declined. I remember being in the hospital, in and out of the Cuero Hospital all the time. They were so amazing. And even my small town hospital was one of the best hospitals I've ever been in. They took really, really good care of me. And that season, I remember being in the hospital one night and I had uncontrollable shaking. This. And I had never had that. Anytime something new happens, you kind of freak out. You're like, what is my body doing now? What is this? And I remember the nurse comes in and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And, they're like, this is what happens at the end for people with cancer. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what to say to that. But I'm going to back up. When I decided to go all natural, the only people who believed that I was going to be able to live that route were me and my mom. I'm going to throw my dad under the bus, and I'm sorry if anybody's on here and knows my dad, and I love him dearly. He's my neighbor. He's my best friend. We have the best relationship. But he didn't have the same beliefs that I have. He does now. He takes tons of healthy stuff and he's totally different. But back then he didn't believe in natural health stuff. So I remember my mom had this beautiful place in the mountains, and I remember sitting there when my mom comes in to tell me, she's like, I just talked to your dad, and he wants you to accept that you need to come home. You need to spend the last bit of your life at home. And this is when I was still, this is in the first 6 months of my diagnosis. And it's yeah, the whole family just wants you to come home and just, enjoy the end. Y'all, this is my dad also in this same year called me, and I'm in Arizona, and he's like, come to Texas. I bought you a convertible. I want your hair to blow in the wind while you still have hair. And he did. I drove down, and my dad's the fun dad. He's the guy in college where your mom's like, here's some money for groceries. And my dad's like, here's $20, blow it. So yeah, I had my convertible, and, but I remember sitting in that room and wanting to my mom had all these windows overlooking the mountains. I wanted to break every damn one of them. I was so mad. I was so mad. I just didn't know how people couldn't trust me. I mean, my brothers got into a fist fight about it. Like it was so my brother Jason actually did take my back and take my side from the get-go too. But yeah, I mean, like it's when everybody around you has never seen anybody survive naturally, what does your family think? Like they just worked with what they knew. But I just, went with my instinct, my intuition. I had somebody ask me when I asked like, hey, what do y'all want to know? And she said, did you ever did you ever doubt God? Like, did you ever feel like he wasn't with you? And for sure, 100%. But I also felt him with me. Like it was both. Like, I think like it's both. It was like, I remember so many in those 10 years, I remember I spent a lot of time in the bathtub. So at the end, I had a lot of pain meds. I was on fentanyl patches. I would wear 2 or 3 at a time. I was so skinny, and they're turned on by heat. I also was taking 20 milligrams of Loratab every 2 hours. My doctor at the time here in Cuero, she said she was so afraid I was going to have a pain med addiction, but she's like, we'll cross that bridge later. Like right now, we've got to deal with your pain. I mean, so I would take hot baths because the heat would release the fentanyl in like bursts. So I'd get like some more pain relief. So I spent a lot of time in the bathtub. And I remember those were when I would call my mom and I would just cry. And I'd just be like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I just can't. Like, how many years do I have to do this? I mean, there were entire years that I spent on a sofa, like where I couldn't breathe. I would have to take a pain pill, wait 30 minutes for it to really like kick in to get me over the edge to like be able to eat 3 bites of food. And then that little bit of fullness would make me so uncomfortable. I'm now in more pain. I couldn't string sentences together because my fluid, I had 50 pounds of fluid. I couldn't breathe. I would sit up and the weight from my stomach would cut off the circulation to my legs. And so then I would lay down, but the weight of the pain on my back. And then it just was miserable. And I don't want anybody to have to spend as much of their 20s wondering if the best of your life was gone. Like I did. I wondered, would I ever have any of that again? Like, did I already miss all of it? Was that it? And so yeah, God was definitely always there. But I still always question too. It's like, there's like this, my mom and I had this conversation about, when you're a kid and you hear God, I said, when I was a kid and my dad, like I told you, was a disabled Vietnam veteran, and to pretend that didn't jack him up a little and it didn't affect us kids, I'd be lying. Right. So, I had a traumatic childhood sometimes. And I remember telling her, I said, Mom, even with all the things that went on in my childhood, I still always knew that there was something more. Like I always just felt inside that there was something more. And I said, do you think that's like God? Like, do you think that's how God like shows up for kids? Like, did you you had that, right? And she said, Jen, I never had that. And I don't know what you're talking about. That feeling that you're describing, I didn't have that as a child. I didn't have that like secure thing that you're describing. And my heart broke for her. That conversation was probably 2 weeks before she passed. And so for me, God was always like, does that kind of paint the picture of just, I never felt like, I didn't know about Jesus until I was much like, I thought Jesus was the side guy. Like me and God were tight. Like I didn't, like if Jesus came with him, I was cool with it, but I didn't really understand until much later anything really. Just, I knew that God got me. Like I belonged to him, and for some reason I was special to him, and he made sure I knew it. And I do think that when we talk at the end about the 9 things that are proven in radical remission, one of them is a sense of purpose, like knowing that you're worthy, which is also, if you know me for even 5 minutes, I'm super passionate about like health, emotional health, right? Like if you don't look, I'm gonna take a little detour and then we'll get back on track. But there's a test called the ACEs quiz. Anybody familiar with the ACEs quiz? So the ACEs quiz is a test that you take that you can establish how much trauma a child goes through from the time they're born to the time they're 18. Okay, and that score is things like, were they hungry? Or did they watch violence? Did they experience physical abuse, sexual abuse? Did they not have running water? Did they ever go to school dirty? Was anybody in their home ever incarcerated? Y'all see where I'm going with all this, right? Okay. There's like these factors. And on a scale of 1 to 10, the higher your score, the more likely you are to have cancer, heart disease, like major health issues, the more trauma that you experience as a child. So I get super passionate about, it's why one of the things I do for a living that I do, which I'm not going to go into, I love helping women make money because I want women to have choices so that kids don't have unnecessary high ACEs score. Okay. So all of that's connected, right? All that's connected. If you think that emotionally what happens to people is disconnected from their health, it's not. Okay, where was I? Help me get back on track. So this season where I get really, really sick, I have to have the Tinkoff catheter out. So now I have to do the thing I've been dreading, which is find a surgeon again. Now remember, my last surgery, I almost died. So I'm not super stoked about this, but I have to find a surgeon. It's becoming apparent that it's either, if I'm going to live, there's nothing natural that's going to get me out of this at this point. Like I'm 50 pounds of fluid. I can't eat, all the things. I describe my world at this time as gray. One of the best quotes, and I'm going to butcher it, so just get the gist of it and you can go find it later. There was a book, I remember I did a lot of reading this season, okay? And I read Memoirs of a Geisha. And in it, there's this beautiful line where she talks about pain stripped everything from me, everything that I thought made me me. And that all that was left was who I really was. And like that, like, I don't know what else could describe that season. Like think about your personality. Like, do you have a sense of humor? Are you funny? Do you sing? Do you dance? Like, think about all the things that make you you. When you're in pain, none of that. You don't have any of that. There's none of that. And you're just like abruptly face to face with crap. This is it. This is, it's like down to the bare bones of who I am. And you have to find a way to like what you see. There's some work there. There's some emotional work there. So I'm looking for a surgeon. There's basically 2 in the US that'll do radical abdominal surgeries. You have to apply. I apply to this surgeon, praying. At this point, I'm so sick, guys. Like I've now lost hope of natural health being able to get me out of this, right? It's been able to keep me alive, but I'm so full of cancer. There's no turning back at this point. So, I apply to the surgeon. He accepts my case. And I can't even tell you what it was like the month between the application and him saying he'll take my case. Realize if he said he wouldn't take my case, I knew I had, what was I going to do? Then we found out it was $30,000 just to get on his books. So insurance was going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a 12-hour surgery. And because his work is so specialized, he does charge an additional $30,000 on top of the surgery. I will tell you, it was worth every penny. He's legit one of the only doctors in the world who wouldn't butcher me. Okay. And so my town actually did a fundraiser and raised $37,000. My friends, my family, there were golf tournaments. I was in the junior league at the time, and those girls were cooking and selling casseroles, and there was a million. I mean, my family, everybody did everything. It was crazy. My town has been very invested. There was a benefit. People auctioned off boats and boat trips and hunting trips and all kinds. My brother made this huge, big barbecue, you name it, they auctioned it off. My family just all got behind it, and friends, and put it together. So I was able to go to the surgeon. The time that he accepted my case was January. It was not until March that I had the surgery at the end of March. I went in, it was over 12 hours. It's super radical. There were 21 different procedures. I did a full hysterectomy. Oh, that was one of the things. I'm gonna talk about this because I know that fertility is something a lot of people struggle with, and I want to share my experience with that. So I knew that I very likely couldn't have kids just because of the way the cancer was growing. It's in your abdominal cavity. Like I had doctors that say, hey, even if your fallopian tubes and stuff are fine, they're so tangled in cancer at this point, nothing's gonna happen. But still, Dr. Sugarbaker wouldn't, his condition, he would not agree to take my case unless I agreed to a full hysterectomy. So I'm 30 years old at the time, had not had children, definitely wanted to have kids. And like, it was the, it was a hard, like, honestly, the struggle of that decision was so hard. But then when I made the decision, like, it was easy. Like, it was easy after that. Like, when the decision was taken away from me, and it was like, okay, this is, because here's his argument. He's like, if I leave your reproductive system, there's going to be cancer on it and it's going to grow back. So he's like, what's the point? So we went full hysterectomy. He was able to do that. I also, y'all, I'm 30 years old, and I was going in, and it was maybe going to be a permanent colostomy bag. I don't know if any of you have ever dealt with that. I will say, having had one now temporarily, it's not as bad. Like, it's not, I legit was like, my life's going to be over if I have a permanent colostomy bag. No, it's not. I remember when the nurse, like, that when I wake up and I'm like, do I have a temporary or a permanent? That was all I wanted to know. Do I have a temporary or a permanent colostomy? And my mom's like, temporary. And I'm like, woo, okay. So, yeah, so there was that side. But yeah, so post surgery, I did not bounce back really quickly. I was in ICU for 30 days. What happened was that my system just didn't turn back on. So I want you to picture my mom at my bedside in ICU, listening to nurses and doctors come through every round, and they legit would say, this girl is dying from, like, that. When they couldn't, my body wouldn't stop producing the fluid, which then gets all of everything off of balance, and my intestines weren't cutting back on. I wasn't absorbing nutrients. I was basically wasting away. I was rushed off with high heart rate, whatever, tachycardia, whatever. That happened so many times. I was rushed out of the room and moved to ICU. And, so it was not an easy recovery. I remember going in thinking, I'm young, I'm healthy. He told me it was going to be 20 days in the hospital with the Sugarbaker special. There's an entire wing where people, I mean, like, I had tubes coming out everywhere. Some of you have probably seen the pictures. I mean, it was his surgeries are super radical, but he scraped everything. He meticulously got everything. The only place that was questionable was on my liver. So after the surgery, before they closed me up, or right after they closed me up, they put in a heated chemotherapy. So I've had one chemo treatment. It's a heated chemotherapy. They legit rolled my body to move it around and get it into every nook and cranny. And then I had, I think they're Jackson Pratt tubes that the fluid then drained out of for several days. So I had those to drain the chemo out. It was enough chemo that I did end up losing most of my hair, most of the backside, and I ended up having to do super short. But that was my one chemotherapy, and I never had to do radiation. He felt like that the one heated chemo would be enough to deal with whatever he couldn't get, that he didn't see visually. So yeah, then I had a hard time just kicking my body on. I mean, like, it was hard to eat, like, all the things. So I was in the hospital 42 days. I was expecting to be there 20. I go home. And still, I talked him out of the feeding tube. He wanted me to go home on a feeding tube, and I argued with my surgeon left and right, up and down. And if you know me, I won. I shouldn't have, because I continued to lose weight. I ended up having to fly to Arizona. I got down to 82 pounds. Arizona is where my naturopath was and my doctors. I was down to 82 pounds. Just to keep that into perspective, guys, that's about 55 pounds less than I am now. And I am not a big girl. And I remember at that point, I was so frustrated. Like, I'd gone through the surgery. I'd gone through so much pain. I mean, immediately after surgery, the pain, I can't even, I remember I couldn't talk. I had the tube in my mouth. I'm on the table after surgery. And, the fentanyl had all worn off. The patches had been taken off. They hadn't given me pain meds yet. And I was recovering, waking up, having a drastic, radical abdominal surgery. And I had felt everything. They don't tell you that. I felt everything. And I remember thinking that if I would have known the pain would have been this great, I would not have done it. I would have chosen to die. Like, it was that bad before they got it under control. So then I just hopped around. Where was I? Okay, so Arizona. I'm getting IVs. I'm doing all the so now I'm back with my natural team. My intestines are not cutting on. I'm in pain. Everything's going through me. I'm either in solid ileuses or like it's just solid pain. Here's what I now know about intestines. When he removed a large section of my intestines. Your intestines, each section absorb a different thing. Okay, so guess what? I'll tell you this story and then this will make sense. So I go into my surgeon. I'd already told my mom if I get below 80 points, I'm going to commit suicide. Like I'm over this battle. I'm emotionally done. I'm not going to be 30 years old weighing 79 pounds. I'm not doing like this. It's just like the weight just kept going the wrong direction. I couldn't figure out how we were going to turn it around. So I go into my doctor's office and I'm joking with the nurse Connie. I'm like, Connie, and I'm like, can't you just put some fats in my IV bag? Like, come on. And she's like, hold on, let me ask the doctor. She goes and asks him. She comes back in and she's like, we're going to put lipids in your IV today. And so they put lipids in my IV, and that's the weekend it turned around. The next week I started putting on weights. Here's what I want you to know. The section of my intestines that had been removed did not allow me to absorb lipids. There's different, like this section absorbs vitamin K. This section, your intestines will retrain. But in the beginning, I had no way to absorb things that my body needed. Isn't this fascinating? So a joke about putting fat in my bloodstream is another place that saved my life. Like it's so crazy. Okay, so then I finally started feeling better. Y'all, I hit the ground running. Like that season, when I started putting the weight back on, started feeling better. My doctor had told me I had to put on 25 pounds and be able to run 2 miles in order to reverse my colostomy bag. Guess what? Girl was single-minded. I was running this road in the summer heat, did not care. I was eating Krispy Kreme donuts. I was eating like 5 meals a day. Anything I could to put on that 25 pounds and run 2 miles. So he reversed the surgery back at just 5 months later. He was able to reverse the colostomy. I started working. Life moved on. I want to take a little detour here and talk about caretakers, because my mom was my right-hand woman caretaker through all of this. And when I bounced back and hit the ground running, remember, I don't remember all the things. I don't remember the 40 days in the hospital. I don't remember all the conversations. Like, I don't remember all the things. My mother remembered all the things. She did not bounce back. She ended up with PTSD. Never diagnosed, but I guarantee there was depression. There was like she had just gone through the most traumatic thing of her life. And so no surprise, it was, less than 2 years later, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so then, I'm working and I quickly went and got myself involved in a business and was working all the time. And just like, I just decided that my health was behind me. Like that battle was over. I'm not going to have health issues anymore. Like I'm done with it and I'm going on about my business, and I'm going to make up for 10 years that I didn't get to be productive and all of that. So mom starts her cancer battle. In my mind, she's in great hands. Like we've already done this. Like we've already done this. She's got the doctors, she's got the things, all the things. We end up, and most of you know, I've lost my mom. I lost her in 2015, but in part of that journey, we went to Switzerland. And Switzerland was a conversation that changed my life, okay? So I was in there with her, so she got to go to some really great, we've got some great family friends, but she was able to go to this clinic in Switzerland. I met Victoria Principal there. Anybody, y'all know Victoria Principal, right? She was super sweet and gave me chocolate and told me I needed to fix my posture. She got me out of the chair and legit was like, no, ma'am, and made me fix my posture. So at this clinic, I'm there and the doctor is going through her paperwork and he's like, okay, so, he points at me. I'm like headphones in the corner, like I'm there for support. And he's like, are you the daughter that has cancer? And I was like, no. I don't have cancer anymore. Like this is 4 years after my surgery. I'm like, I don't have cancer anymore. He's like, no. You're the doctor. I'm looking in the paperwork. You're the daughter that has cancer. And I was like, no, I don't have it anymore. Like they got it all. He's like, well, what did they do? I'm like, they had surgery. I don't have it anymore. And he said, no, your biology grows cancer. What are you doing to change your biology? And that changed my life. Again, a doctor had a conversation with me and said something that everybody needs to hear. This is not how we look at cancer in the US. We look at like, you have cancer, you do surgery, chemo, or radiation, and you don't have cancer anymore. And yet we're surprised at the recurrence level. Like, this has got to change how we look at it. You've got to, like, that, again, conversation changed and saved my life. My life is entirely different in a million ways because of that conversation. I made changes, and so, you know, there were only 4 years that I was not hardcore into my health, and he's the one that got me back on it, right? I want to also say some things about you know, the battle, and including in my mom, and like with my mom. So I love that my story has these really sweet, like, big picture parts that you get to see how the parts work out, and I'm going to share a couple of them now, and then I'll kind of go into some more of the health stuff. But some ways that you become very specifically equipped for your own battles. Okay. So I told y'all that my dad, you know, was a disabled Vietnam veteran, and I have no judgment on that. Like, I have an experience from my childhood of a man who had his own demons to battle. He was in a country that did not appreciate what he did, and came back to, you know, pennies that he was supposed to live on. And like, I don't know what kind of anger and what he had seen when he was over there. He's a Purple Heart and bronze heart medal receiver. So I know that he's went through things that I can't imagine. Okay. So in some of the trauma of being, he at the time he was an alcoholic. So I'm considered a daughter of an alcoholic. If you go and research some of the things that are there's a lot of negative stuff that comes with being the child of an alcoholic, period, right? And y'all with me on this? Okay, well, there's also really great things that come from it. There are things like the ability to not believe what people tell you when they tell you no. There's this ability to believe in yourself that you can do things when people tell you you can't. There's this like tenacity that comes from it. And so if you look at my story, like, did God give me the dad that I needed to have the attitude to beat a cancer that people didn't beat? Like, can you see how I had the right childhood? I had the right one. I had the one that equipped me to go to battle for something. Like, I had the right foundation. And, you know, I told y'all when I was in high school, I'll give you another part of that story. When I was in high school, I was really mad at my mom for reasons I won't go into. I was very angry at her, decisions that she had made. I didn't understand them, and I didn't respect them, and I would legit call her on the phone to tell her I hated her when I was in high school. She'd ruined my life. I hate you. And we weren't close until my friend passed away, and my mom legit had to just come and pick me up off the floor and, you know, and care for me to recover from that season. And even then, you know, like, there still was this, you know, like, there's still this distance between us. When I got my cancer diagnosis, all of that disappeared. Okay. And from that point forward, she was my best friend. And there's not a thought I had that didn't get discussed with my mom. Like, my mom, like, I talk to my mom every day. When I lost my mom, I couldn't drive for 3 months because every time I get in the car, I call my mom. You know, it's like every conversation, every thought I had, every dream I had, there's not anything that was separate from her. It wasn't like, oh, I remember this conversation with my mom. Every thought I had, my mom knew. Like, we just talked about everything. Okay. Because I lost her in 2015, imagine if I hadn't got my cancer diagnosis. What kind of relationship? How many years would I have lost? How many years would I have still held a grudge? How many years would I have lost? Like, cancer gave me like so many years with her that, like, I have no regrets. Very little, very few. Like, we spent it. Like, our relationship, we lived a life. Like, I would have hated for it to have been written any other way and us have only had the 4 years of her battle. I don't want that. I want the one we got. Okay. Whew. It's a mother-daughter story. There's a book in here somewhere. We did both blog through the whole thing. There are probably hours and hours on a website, on a Caring Bridge website of all of it. Okay. I do want to share some stuff about what, like, at the end of the day, this is the question I have, like, what makes it, why do you live, Shanna? Well, number one, God. Like, it's all God. I'll even tell you this. So when I first found out that it was asbestos cancer, and somebody said you need to go hire an attorney, and I went and met with a really incredible attorney out of Houston, Mark Lanier. And you want to talk about some funny stuff, the way God works out? Let me tell you this. When I was in high school, remember, I'm a senior living on my own, and I competed in the Houston Livestock Show, the art program. And I made it to the Houston show, but I wasn't good enough to get auctioned. But there was an piece of artwork that year that was incredible. It was a rodeo clown. I remember it so clearly. It sold for $50,000. This is in 1997. And a kid's artwork went for $50,000, which means that kid got $50,000 or most of that for for his college education as a scholarship. I walk into Mark Lanier's office, and what do I see? That painting. He bought it. Like, is this not crazy how your life just intersects with people? Like, I was like 19, I know exactly, and he was like, I want to see your work. And I'm like, no, I don't look like that. But I remember him telling me, he said, Shanna, I have a friend who's an atheist. And you know what he tells me? He says, Mark, you need to tell your friend, all of the people, all the cancer patients that you meet with, you need to tell them to pray. Because I'm an atheist, but I have the science that when people pray and are prayed for, their results are better in healthcare. Their prognosis is different. He's like, so I don't know, like, he's like, that was one of the Mark Lanier conversation. Yeah. So, and I won't, like, that was also a little bit of a mind jerk, because for my asbestos trial, so I did sue asbestos companies. The biggest one I was suing filed for bankruptcy a week before we went to trial. We were suing for millions. Usually 22-year-old girls don't have an incurable cancer. So, it was a big deal. Just so you know, this is what companies do. They file for bankruptcy. There are all kinds of loopholes. They get out of paying those compensations. It's a thing. Now that you have attention to it, it's a real thing where corporations are able to get out of this responsibility that they have for putting poisonous things into the world. Okay, so talking about the things that you can do, like what are the difference? So obviously having a belief. One of the best documentaries I've ever come across, like, I watched this and I was like, this is my story. And it's called Heal. And it's about radical remissions. And I'm going to tell you, like, these are the 9 things. So they basically studied all the radical remissions in the world, not just USA, but like all these people that are having radical remissions, and what are the things that make it happen. And there are some very common denominators. They narrowed it down to about 75 things. And out of those 75 things, there were 9 that were almost always used in every single case. And I'm going to tell you what those 9 are. And here's the crazy thing. Only 2 of them are health related. But does that surprise you? Only 2 of them. Okay. The first one is to radically change your diet. This is something that happens in people who have radical remission. Radically change your diet. Number 2, and I'll do a post on this on social media today or tomorrow so that you'll have this as well. You don't have to write it down. They're proactive in health. This is where, where if a doctor says, go home and do this, I was a skeptic about everything. Like, if a doctor said, this is how it is, I'm like, I don't believe you, right? There's a generation, like my parents' generation, they were raised to believe, if your doctor said to do this, you do this. And so there's really an advantage to being proactive versus reactive. Showing up to a doctor's appointment, researching with questions. I remember there was a great book by Bernie Siegel. I don't remember the name of it right now, but I remember that was the first book I read about being empowered with your, like, I was interviewing, I was looking for a doctor to partner with me. If they talked down to me, if they treated me like I was second or that I couldn't understand what they were saying, they did not get a second appointment with me. I only worked with doctors who treated me like a partner, like we were going to make decisions together. That is a proactive relationship with your healthcare. Okay. Number 3, follow intuition. I know we talked about that, but the thing inside of you that says, this is how I need to do it, like honor that, honor the intuition. Number 4, use herbs and supplements. So there's your second one of things that the everybody who had a radical remission used herbs and supplements, but that's only the second one with health, right? Number 5, you've got to release suppressed emotions. You got to do this work. That has to be done. I'm going to give y'all another story about my mom. Because I've told you her story about how she didn't ever really feel it worthy. And I'll give you, oh gosh, I could write a book about my mom's story. It breaks my heart. My mom was born, my grandmother divorced my mom's dad before my mother was born. My mom was born in 1949. Women didn't do that in 1949. Okay. So my mom's born without a dad. She never met her dad. To this day, my grandmother would never tell me why she divorced him. I don't know. But she never let him near my mom. And my grandmother's brothers upheld that decision. And so he was never allowed near my mom. So my mom grew up without a dad in the 1950s. And she always felt less than. She wasn't invited. Her mom was single until she was 18. So she wasn't invited to things that couples did. She wasn't in the right crowd. My mom never felt like she belonged. And this is all important. Sometimes I'm like, do I share too much? But this is important. We're in a small town. She didn't have the right last name. My family didn't come from wealth. My grandmother grew up as a sharecropper. All of her siblings, they all picked cotton. They didn't even own their house or land. My grandmother did well for herself. She, became, tied for valedictorian and ended up going to college and did really well for herself. But still, she made a decision, and for whatever reason, my mom was raised in a season, like she had a heart. She struggled with unworthiness. Okay, and how do I tell this part? As moms, do you sometimes let your children treat you worse than you let other people treat you? Okay, stop doing that. My mom did that too, and I will tell you that. Like any of you who work with me now, there's a lot of people that are in my company with me on here. Any of you who do this with me now, you don't know the same me before my mom died. Like it's almost like I got to be some of the worst versions of myself because I got to be bratty and selfish and like take things out on my mom that I would never take out on anybody else in the world. And it's like, and I like, so when we talk about regrets, these are regrets I have. Right? And it's like the way that I treated her just reiterated like it's like she believed that she didn't deserve to be treated better. She believed it. And that breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that in all of her life, like even her own kids, like we even did it to her. And it's like, I don't want to say it's because she let us, but as parents, do you know what I mean? Right? Like, so, okay, that is to say, we had a conversation when she was in her battle. She went to a clinic in Mexico a couple times, and, she was talking different diets and things like this. And I want to say my mom's commitment to natural health, she started having major health issues like chronic fatigue syndrome. I think there was a lot of toxicity. We can talk about that. When you talk about the generation that was subjected to lead, and then the generation subjected to mercury, and then now we have the Roundup. I don't know how to pronounce that one. I'm going to learn it because I talk about it all the time. There's some people that don't do as well with detoxing. I'm one of them. I've had genetic testing since my mom has passed. So I know her and I's genetics are very similar. And so she had a lot of health issues. I do not think that if my mother had not been as committed to natural health, that we would have had all the years with her that we had, right? So, I guess in some ways it's like she died young at 65, but in other ways, I do know that we got her longer than if she hadn't been on a major health commitment. And I say that because there's probably some moms who are in their 20s or 30s that do not prioritize their health. And if my mom hadn't, I don't know that I would have gotten as many good years with her as I did. Okay. But in this conversation I had with her, and she was talking about all the things she needed to do, I said, Mom, you can go to all the cancer clinics, you can do all the things, but how do we get you to feel like you're worthy? Like if you don't change that thing, Mom, none of this is going to, that's just not, that's not going to be enough. It's not going to be enough. And my mom could trust me to tell her like it was. I didn't sugarcoat it. And I wish that I was wrong, but I say that because, this is an important piece. And I know that it's not everybody's story. Somebody else can say, hey, my mom had a great mindset and she passed anyway. I'm not saying that it's everything. There's no right. But I know that this is important, and it's important that we, that for ourselves, we fight for that I am and be in relationships and all the things. This is so important. So important. Okay. Release suppressed emotions was number 5. Number 6 is increase positive emotions. Okay. Increase positive emotions. Number 7 is community. The people who have radical remissions are in community. They embrace social support. This is really important for health and for happiness. There's another great documentary called Happy that goes into this. Number 8 is deepen your spiritual connection. You've got to believe in something. That's got to be there. And then number 9 is have a strong reason for living. You've got to have a purpose. You've got to know that there's something that only you bring to the world. And without it, the world doesn't get it. Okay. I'm going to hop in. I haven't looked at the chat at all. Tell me what else, what questions you have. I'm going to scroll in here and see. Yeah. So now, I love it. Cappy says she has a Mark Lanier story. If you dated him, Cappy, I'm going to laugh even harder. Okay, I still have a few more minutes. Tell me what else y'all want to know. What parts did I not go into as deep? Oh gosh, yeah. So me and my mom made amends. That's a good question, Terry. To clarify, me and my mom made amends as soon as I got my diagnosis of cancer. I was at 21. That was it. Everything was squashed. I mean, when you're told that you are not going to live very long, you live differently. It's gosh. The thing that I learned of not taking anything for granted and living in the moment, I wish that for everybody. And I think in some ways I still have it. I learned it. I learned it really good. I learned it so well that when I came out cancer free, I went to therapy because I didn't know how to dream. Even now, I still struggle with it. It's anybody who's on my team knows that this is I'm always working on mindset and dreaming bigger. It's really hard to be told that, think about I mean, if I would have wanted at a very young age and held tightly to being married, having kids, having a career, all of those things were going to guarantee heartbreak to me. Right. And so I just live very in the moment. So yes, with my mom, we had a hard teenage years, but as soon as I got my cancer diagnosis, we were best friends and it was a non-issue. And, yeah, no, she's my best friend. And I'll tell you a sweet thing. My mom had this ability of having a lot of best friends. I'm blessed with that too. And they all know about each other. Right. And, so at her, after she passed and, all of her friends, Andrea and Don, she had this childhood group of best friends and a college group of best friends. And then she had best friends everywhere. And so when I visit with them all the time, they're she was my best friend. She was my, Andrea went with me to Africa. Well, she was my best friend. And they all say that. And the whole time I'm thinking, Nah, girl, she was my best friend. No, 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 no. Y'all are cute. Um, um, yeah. You're welcome. Um, Worthiness is one of my biggest challenge. I think it's the the fight for like the worthiness is really, I think, where it's at. Um, y'all know I'm a Christian. I believe that we have an enemy, and I think that the way that he steals so much from us is in childhood. I think he gets us to believe lies that we don't belong, we're not worthy, we're not good enough, we don't measure up, and then that broken tape works, and so it just is on repeat for the rest of your life. Like our enemy is not creative. Like, right? Like he ain't throwing something new at you. He's gonna throw what works and does it over and over again. And then we believe it. And so this is why we're told the battle is in the mind. It's taking thoughts captive, and is this the truth? And the truth is, I'm going to give you the best. I learned this. I went through holy yoga training, and it's called the little truth and the big truth. Right. So when you're feeling things, a lot of times we work from a place of emotion. Like, so I had a traumatic childhood, or, an alcoholic father, and or any of that stuff. Right. And hold it. Hold on one second. And sorry, I've got stuff popping up. And from that position, if I make decisions from there, is it true that that was my experience? Yes, but it's a little truth. What's the big truth? The big truth is I am whole. The big truth is I am loved. I am blessed. I am safe. Like, all the things that we know, and I'm a Christ girl. You don't have to agree with me, but I'm just telling y'all, this is my story, this is my show. So all of the things that we have in Christ, like, that's the big truth. So when you're up, you have to make decisions from your big truth. You have to show up in life from your big truth, not from your little truth. I mean, the same thing. I mean, my cancer battle, that all fits, right? Yeah. So I guess at the end of the day, I appreciate all of y'all hopping on and doing this with me. I will totally print out the comments and scroll back through as well. Yeah. Any other questions? As far as the health stuff, I guess I really want to be like, and what I like, the end of the story is we live in a day and age that you can biohack your body. So to ignore things at this point in our lives to me is just, it's crazy. Pay attention. Like, if I did genetics testing. I know that I don't detox well. I know that I don't make or absorb enough antioxidants. So that means free radicals wreak havoc in my body, right? Or wreak havoc in my body. I know, and that also accelerate, that's a big one, antioxidants and free radicals. I also have the MTHFR gene mutation, so that affects absorption and detoxing. I know that I'm predisposed for probably diabetes as well as heart issues. So if you haven't done genetic testing, do it. The thing is, once you have that information, you can now change the way you eat. You can change the way you supplement. You can change everything, and change the outcome. You're not limited to whatever anybody says. Like, go. I will say one more thing. When I got diagnosed and I went to the internet and started researching, the things that I found then you won't find now. We live in if you think that we live in a world of free information, you are so wrong. Okay? I can't go on my social media and post about CBD. If I write CBD in the text, Facebook, Instagram totally decreases visibility. They take it from you. I can't tell you that story. Same thing with when I say natural health or turmeric or NAC or GABA or anything like that. Those are all hot words to Facebook, Instagram, Google, all the things. They decrease visibility. Why is that? Why do they not want you to know about natural things that have clinical studies to prove that they work? I don't know. Right? If you find the dollars, if you look at pharmaceutical companies now, when I was a kid growing up, pharmaceutical companies had older people, gray hair in the advertisements. Y'all remember? There were never kids in pharmaceutical advertisements. There were never single or young moms. That wasn't what was in the pharmaceutical world. It is now. It is now. So for some reason, they don't want you to know about things that don't get to get patented. Plants don't get to get patented. There's nobody gets to make the big money off of them. So do your research, be an advocate, this is why, everybody knows I do network marketing. This is why it has to be a grassroots movement. My company can never say what turmeric does. It's going to require me to be in somebody's living room giving you an education on what natural health things can do, because I can't say it on social media. My company can't if they said it, they'd be shut down by the FDA. It doesn't matter that there's thousands of articles that support any of the things that we're saying. We can't say it. So it is harder than ever for you to get the truth about what you have access to. And you've just got to do the work. Just because it's hard doesn't mean you can't find it. It doesn't mean that you can't plug into communities that will help you find it. Find somebody that's already ahead of you on that road and lock arms with them and get this information, because this is it. Like I'm all about the freedom movement, and let me tell you, here's the way is stay healthy. Stay out of the system. Stay super healthy. Okay. I really appreciate y'all letting me share this. I'd love if there's things I didn't cover. I totally don't mind doing a series of these and covering some different parts. So if there's things that you want to hear, reach out to me, tell me what they are, and we'll keep having conversations about it. Okay.
Thank you, Shanna.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Shanna.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Shanna.
Y'all are so welcome.
Thank you, Sister Shanna.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
Check your text.
Check your text. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Shanna.
You're welcome.
Come on, let's put it together here.